In the final section of this week's module, we will be looking at arithmetic operations of fractions. We can perform four basic arithmetic operations of fractions: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. A defined term for this week's module is equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions can be defined as fractions with different numerators and denominators that represent the same value or proportion of the whole. Examples of equivalent fractions would be 1/2 equals 4/8. Another example would be 7/8 equals 28/32. 5/15 equals 1/3. And finally, 17/340 is equal to 1/20. When we are reducing fractions, you are also creating more simple equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions. Every fraction can be written in an infinite number of ways. So for example, 1/3 could equal 2/6, 3/9, 4/12, and 5/15. These are just some of the ways of writing 1/3. They are all different ways of writing exactly the same number, so they are all equal. A defined term for this week's module is reciprocal. Definition of reciprocal. The reciprocal of a number is 1 divided by the number. Looking at fractions specifically, the reciprocal of 3/5 is 5/3. In this case, the numerator and denominator just switch places. And you can kind of think of it as flipping the fraction upside down. Before getting into arithmetic operations of fractions, let's take a closer look at mixed and improper fractions. It is sometimes necessary to convert a mixed number to an improper fraction. So to do this, we multiply the whole number by the fractional denominator and add the numerator. So in an example, 4 wholes and 3/4, or 4 3/4, can be equal to 19/4. Okay, so these are equivalent fractions. And to convert the mixed number 4 3/4 to the improper fraction 19/4, let's follow those simple steps. So we will take our whole number of 4, multiply it by the denominator, the fractional denominator of 4. So 4 times 4 is 16, and then adding that remainder or numerator, 16 plus 3 is 19. 19/4 is the conversion. So any whole number can be converted to a fraction by placing it over a denominator of 1. For example, 6 is equal to 6/1. Our first arithmetic operation of fractions will be adding fractions. To add fractions together, we need them to have the same denominator. If they already have the same denominator, we just add the numerators together. The denominator stays the same. As an example, 1/5 plus 3/5, we add the numerators together. 1 plus 3 is equal to 4, and the denominator stays the same as 5. So therefore, 1/5 plus 3/5 is equal to 4/5. The addition of fractions is never quite so easy. If the denominators are not the same, then we have to make the fractions into equivalent fractions with the same denominator in order to be able to perform the operation. So in an example, let's look at 1/3 plus 2/5. Step 1, multiply both numbers in the first fraction by the denominator of the second fraction. So 1/3 is the first fraction. Both of these numbers are going to be multiplied to the denominator of the second fraction, which is 5. Okay, and step 2, multiply both numbers in the second fraction by the denominator of the first fraction. So 2/5 gets multiplied, both of these numbers, to 3, 2 times 3 and 5 times 3. This is then equal to 5 over 15 plus 6 over 15. We now have two fractions with the same denominator, and we can perform the addition. So 5 plus 6 is equal to 11. This is 11/15. So 1/3 plus 2/5 is equal to 11/15. Subtracting fractions is similar to the addition of fractions. To subtract fractions, we need them to have the same denominator. If they are already the same, then we just subtract the numerators. The denominators stay the same. So for example, 6 over 7, subtract 2 over 7. The denominators are the same, we just subtract the numerators. So 6 minus 2 is equal to 4. This is 4/7. So 6/7 subtract 2/7 is 4/7. Like the addition of fractions, subtracting fractions can also become complicated if the denominators are not the same. We have to make the fractions into equivalent fractions with the same denominator in order to perform the operation. So for example, let's do 3/5 minus 1/3. In step 1, let's multiply both numbers in the first fraction by the denominator of the second fraction. 3/5 is the first fraction. The denominator of the second fraction is 3. So let's multiply 3 and 5 both by 3. And then in step 2, multiply both numbers in the second fraction by the denominator of the first fraction. So 1/3 is the second fraction, and 5 is the denominator of the first fraction. So we will multiply both 1 and 3 by 5. Once we do this, we will have equivalent fractions, which is equal to 9 over 15 subtract 5 over 15. Now we have equivalent fractions with the same denominator. We can now perform the operation, and we subtract the numerators. 9 minus 5 equals 4, so our answer is 4 over 15, or 4/15. So 3 over 5 subtract 1 over 3 is equal to 4 over 15. Multiplying fractions is even easier than the addition or subtraction of fractions. So let's look at multiplying proper fractions. And as a recap, a proper fraction is one where the numerator is less than the denominator. Multiplying proper fractions is easy. We just multiply the numerators and then multiply the denominators. So for example, 1/2 times 1/3, we multiply the numerators across. 1 times 1 is equal to 1. And we multiply the denominators across. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. Therefore, our answer is 1/6. So 1/2 times 1/3 is equal to 1/6. Let's recap the multiplication of fractions. Multiplying fractions is even easier than adding or subtracting fractions. We just multiply the numerators together, multiply the denominators together, that's it, and may have to reduce the final answer. As an example, 2/5 times 3/7 is equal to 6 over 35. And that's already reduced. Now let's look at dividing fractions. Simply put, dividing fractions is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Let's look at an example of this. 3/5 divided by 2/7. Let's change this into multiplying by the reciprocal. So we'll equal 3/5 times 7 over 2. 7 over 2 is the reciprocal of 2 over 7. So we've changed the division into a multiplication problem. And now we can simply multiply across. 3 times 7 is 21, 5 times 2 is 10. So the answer is 21 over 10. So 3/5 divided by 2/7 equals 21 over 10. Now let's look at dividing proper fractions by whole numbers. Dividing a proper fraction by a whole number is actually pretty easy. We just multiply the denominator by the whole number. The numerator stays the same. This is exactly the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So as an example, let's look at 1/5 divided by 2. 1/5 divided by 2 can equal 1 divided by 5 times 2. The 2 is multiplied in the denominator to the 5, which is equal to 1/10. So 1/5 divided by 2 is equal to 1 over 10.